Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Thanks for tuning in for another episode. I have gotten a lot of questions recently about whether or not there are things that I do to help me catch more big fish. What do I do specifically that increases the number of big fish that I come across? And I do definitely have a few different tactics that I like to employ. Whether those are, well, I'm fishing a tournament and I'm looking for the 5 biggest fish that I need to catch, or if I'm just out fun fishing, these are things that I do that will help trigger the number of bites that you get and increase the odds that some of those will be bigger fish. There is not one simple thing that you can do that will only catch you big fish or that will always increase the number of big fish bites that you get. But there are some simple changes that you can implement into the techniques and the ways that you're fishing that I do think will help you catch more big fish. So before we get into those, I do want to remind you that I am doing lake breakdowns for Fish the Moment with Johnny Schultz and Randy Blockett and myself. I specialize in northern lakes and lakes with smallmouth, so check those out. And if you want me to break down your local lake, if I haven't done it yet, you can request a personal lake breakdown and we can handle it that way. Also, if you're looking to purchase some tackle for the upcoming fishing season and you go to Tackle Warehouse, please use the Tackle Warehouse affiliate link that I provide in the video description. That's a good way to help support the channel as well. All right, guys, if you're looking to catch some big fish, these are the things that I do that help me catch more fish that I think if you do as well, will increase the odds of the number of big fish that you're catching. The first one is a simple one, okay? Everyone talks about throwing bigger baits for big fish. That is true to a point, but I will tell you in my personal experience, the only bait type that really matters in is swim baits. I do honestly feel like if you put on a big swim bait or a big glide bait and throw it around in your local lake, even if it's not known as a swim bait lake, you will see a lot of the biggest fish that you've ever seen in that lake. I have had way too many experiences where I put on a big glide bait and go throw it around and I see fish I have not seen ever on that lake before. It's pretty incredible what a big glide bait or a big swim bait will do. It gets the big fish to come out and look at your bait. Now, having said that, I do honestly feel like you'll see way more fish that will than the number of fish that bite that bait. So just because you're throwing a big bait does not necessarily mean you're going to catch that fish, but it will show you the potential that a lake has to offer. So I do agree that throwing a big swim bait is a really good way to catch a giant fish. Now for me, that's not a great tournament technique because the likelihood I'm going to get 5 bites on that swim bait probably isn't going to happen. But if I'm out fun fishing, I have definitely worked in big swim baits and big glide baits into my arsenal because I know it provides me with a good opportunity at catching truly the biggest fish that lives in that lake. So that is one thing. The second thing does have to do with bait choice. I do really think that you want to throw baits that are reaction style baits. So what do I mean by a reaction style bait? I'm talking your chatterbaits, your lipless, a crankbait, anything that is meant to create some sort of erratic motion. Those are the things that trigger big fish that are generally smarter and have seen all the other baits. It's like they can't help themselves. They see a chatterbait go by, that chatterbait darts off to one side, that triggers that big fish into biting. That's one reason why I think you see with chatterbaits don't get as many bites, but the average size is much better on a chatterbait. That's just one of the things that's so great about a chatterbait or a vibrating jig. But here's the key with this, guys. It's not just about using a bait that is meant to have some sort of erratic motion, imparted into the bait, like a chatterbait or a lipless when you're ripping it out of the grass. It's more about implementing an erratic motion into whatever bait you're using. So for instance, if you're flipping a jig, give it a quick hop, give it a quick sharp pop. I'm not talking a big stroke, but more of just a quick pop to get it to, jump a foot off the bottom. So when that bait went from resting still to popping, that's the erratic motion that triggers a big fish into biting. You can do it with anything. I've talked about with a spinner bait. I like to throb the spinner bait to get the blades to flare. If you're throwing a wacky rig, you can give it a quick hard pop after it hits the bottom. It's about imparting erratic action into the bait that you're using. So I think we see better fish get caught with the chatterbaits or lipless because you're imparting so much erratic action. You can do the same thing with almost any bait that you're using, but you have to be aware of the fact that you need to impart that erratic action into probably 90% of the baits that are on the market. But if you do that, you will increase the number of big fish that bite it out of just pure reaction. So that is a huge thing for me. I've talked about it before. I am all about imparting erratic action into baits. So that's a big thing. Another thing, so those are both bait specific. Then you want to look at where you're fishing. So if you're fishing areas that are extremely pressured, in my experience, they may hold a lot of fish, but they generally don't hold the very big fish. And I personally feel like the bigger fish are wiser. They've been around for a while. And a lot of times they would rather be a rogue fish versus getting on, the most popular channel swing or point that gets literally pounded by boat after boat after boat. So what I think you need to do is you need to look where other people are not looking. So, as an example for that, if you've got an area of the lake that just is known for producing the most fish, it's a huge tournament spot, giant community spot. At that point, yes, you could still catch a big fish there, but those fish are really wise. I catch more fish when I'm in areas of the lake that are not known for being like those huge community holes. When I say I catch more fish, I catch more big fish in those areas. Now, I will say it's not like I get on a huge school of them, but I'll find a lot of random big fish. So if I'm going down a bank, I may not be catching that many fish, but when I do catch one, a lot of times it's a big fish. And I feel like it's because those big fish just get out and roam around more on their own. So you want to look where other people are not looking. I do think that that really helps. And we're talking about the biggest fish in the lake. I'm not necessarily talking about 3 and 4 pounders, but I'm talking about the truly big fish for your lake. And that varies from where you're at. If you're on a lake that, 10 pounds is a good tournament weight, a 3 and 4 pounder is a good fish. But if you're on a lake like Chickamauga or Gunnersville, a 3 or 4 pounder is almost an average fish. So you wanna just get out, look elsewhere is I guess how I would say it. You don't want to just key in on those community spots. Another thing when it comes to looking for fish is big fish like to roam, right? They like to get out and be on their own. So a lot of times, in my opinion, and I have nothing to base this off of, but I do know from talking with a bunch of guys that are like really good big fish fishermen, a lot of times what they say is they're finding fish in very much more like just open areas. So it could be they're out suspended and they're over 20 feet of water and they're chasing big shad and therefore they're suspended in 10 or 15 feet, but they don't really have a home base. They're just kind of out roaming around. That makes them extremely difficult to target. We are seeing a lot more big fish get caught because of forward-facing sonar. And that's one of the things that allows people to be so much more efficient on the water when they're fishing suspended fish is forward-facing sonar. So we're seeing that really show up with a lot of big fish catches. But it also can just be, again, what I was just kind of getting at, like areas that don't get the same amount of pressure. It could just be a big flat. You'll have fish that just roam around on a big flat. So you don't want to overlook that. The problem with doing this is a lot of times you're not going to come across the same number of bites that you would get if you're fishing a good area, whether it's a point or a channel swing, areas that have a lot more traffic flow with fish through them. You probably would catch 4 fish to every fish you'd catch if you were just out fishing suspended fish or out on a big flat somewhere just trying to find that needle in the haystack. The thing is, if you're truly after big fish, that's a good way to go about and do it. The last thing that I'm going to mention, I guess I got a couple of things, but the next big thing has to do with something I talk about all the time, and that's isolated targets, right? And this still kind of goes along again with looking where other people aren't looking and, you know, looking more in flats or suspended areas. Big fish a lot of times will dominate a single piece of structure, whether that's a stump, whether it's a boulder, a laydown, they will dominate it. And a lot of times they'll just push those other fish out. The thing is, they generally are on that piece of structure because it's not an obvious piece of structure. So it's not normally going to be just a laydown on the bank that every boat hits as they go by. It's more likely to be a laydown that's on the bottom in 10 feet of water that nobody sees, you know, unless you're really looking for that tree. In my experience, that's how it's been. I'm not saying you won't catch a big fish out of a laydown on the bank, but a lot of times if you're talking, you know, any other time period other than the spring, you got to be looking off the bank for those truly big fish. So fish isolated targets because those big fish will dominate those single spots. And that's one reason I think you see, you know, I've talked about this as well. A lot of the best fishermen out there concentrate solely on fishing isolated targets. They'll try to hit 50, 60, 70 isolated targets throughout the day. They'll pull up on a brush pile, fish the brush pile, go to the next one. Then they'll hit an isolated boulder. Then they'll hit an isolated dock, whatever it is. They just make these milk runs because they know at some point the likelihood is that they're going to run into a bigger than average size fish, and you're fishing the spots that those big fish live. So it's really important to fish for isolated fish. The last thing I'll add, and we don't really have this choice, but if you really want to key in on big fish, the best time to do it is right about now up until the spawn, because the biggest fish in the lake will all be close to the bank for the spawn at some point. So that's when you might be going down the bank and you could flip into a laydown that 5 other boats have just fished and catch that giant, because they got to come into the bank to spawn. So you're going to see more fish this time of year and into, you know, the spawning period. You're going to see more big fish shallow. So if you have the ability to fish for big fish, the best time to do it, in my opinion, is like pre-spawn to spawn period. But we don't always have that decision. We're lucky enough right now to be getting into that timing window. But after the spawn's over, a lot of those big fish, that's when they'll move out and suspend and get off the bank, and they just become that much harder to find. But those are things, guys, that if you key in on those, it will increase the probability of running across a big fish. And that's really what it's all about. You want to increase your odds at having, you know, the most opportunities at a big fish. So if you're going to be chasing big fish, you want to use, you know, if you really want to chase them, your bigger baits definitely do help, but really it's more about swim baits, in my opinion. But you want to impart action. You want to impart erratic action into the baits. And then you got to go out and you got to look for areas where the big fish live. You can't necessarily just get in line with the other boats, because that's not really going to help you too much in terms of catching the big fish. But having said all that, you can catch a big fish almost anywhere, at any time, on any bait. All right, guys, I hope that helped. It was probably a long-winded response, but I do think that these are tips that will help you catch more big fish. If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button. Stay tuned. We got another video coming out tomorrow.